established direct navigation from Europe to Asia for the first time by circumnavigating Africa, going around the tip of South Africa, the Cape of Good Hope. Following on from this, the Portuguese established a state in Asia. They called it the Estado da India, the State of India, a Portuguese maritime empire in Asia, with its capital in Goa in Western India, and many bases across the Indian and Pacific Oceans, including Malacca in modern Malaysia, near Singapore, Macau, near Hong Kong in China, Ambon in eastern Indonesia, and Nagasaki in Japan. Now, it was a maritime empire. It didn't control a lot of territory. It controlled the sea. It controlled the sea, and it controlled a few ports. It made no attempt to conquer large areas of the world. So, looking at a Portuguese map of this time, here's Portugal here, here's Africa. It's quite accurate, isn't it, really? They sailed around here, up to here. Goa is here. Here is Malacca. I haven't got Japan too accurately here, but the Estado de India covers the waters of the Indian and Western Pacific Oceans.
Can you just check that across the
You're absolutely right. Here we are. You can see the inaccuracy of Japan. I've even got a more inaccurate map of Japan, which I'll show you later on. You'll get a good giggle out of that. Now, at the same time as the Portuguese were doing this, as I think everybody knows, in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west from Spain and in search of China and Japan and India, but instead discovered America, which is why Native Americans are called Indians, and why we have the West Indies, which is where he landed on Santo Domingo. As a result of this, we had two Catholic Christian countries, both claiming the rest of the world. This could lead to warfare and disputes among them, and this was resolved by the Pope. Now, the Pope at the time was Alexander VI. His years are there, 1431 to 1503. He was a notorious sort of a character, massively corrupt. He was the father. Popes aren't supposed to have kids, but he did. He was the father of Cesare and Lucrezia Borgia, who were lovers as well as brothers and sisters, and their rivals who attempted to interfere with them, Lucrezia used to poison. Right, so a really lovely family. A model Catholic family, I guess we could say. Pope Alexander VI in 1494 divided the non-Christian world between Spain and Portugal. This was the Treaty of Tordesillas. Tordesillas is a little town on the border between Spain and Portugal. The line was drawn through the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, 370 leagues, which is about 2,000 kilometres, west of the Cape Verde or Cape Verde Islands, which are off the west coast of Africa. Now, in theory, this line went down the middle of the Atlantic. In fact, it kind of, they didn't really know where America was, and Brazil ended up being on the Portuguese side of the line, which is why Brazilians speak Portuguese and the rest of Latin America speaks Spanish. Right? It was all because of the Pope. Now, as they started sailing around the world, the first voyage around the world was in 1521, or completed in 1521, by Ferdinand Magellan. They realised that their spheres into which the non-Christian world was divided, over which they had the right of conquest, etc., would meet again in the Pacific Ocean. And so they started trying to work out where the line would be drawn in the Pacific Ocean. And here we have the first map of the line of demarcation in the Pacific. This is from 1600, and it's the first map of New Guinea. There we are. Portuguese name, Nova Guinea. It's interesting. This map is very interesting. Obviously somebody had been to the Gulf of Carpentaria before this map was drawn. It's before the first recorded Dutch visit to the Gulf of Carpentaria, which was Willem Janszoon in the Duifken in 1606. But someone had been there before 1600, because this is a pretty accurate map of the Gulf of Carpentaria. And here we see New Guinea. They've confused New Guinea and Papua. They've got them as separate islands. In fact, they're joined there. And you can see as we get into eastern Indonesia, it gets more accurate. There's Timor. There's Ternate Tidore. This is Halmahera, etc. This is Borneo. This is Celebes, which is Sulawesi. It's not too bad. But this is where they thought the line went. In fact, when the line was properly surveyed, it was rather west at that point. And the line of the Treaty of Tordesillas, accurately charted, is preserved on the map of Australia. It is the border between Western Australia and the Northern Territory and South Australia. Because in 1770, when James Cook claimed Australia for the British Crown, or New Holland as it was then called, he only claimed the Spanish part. He didn't claim the Portuguese part, because Portugal at that time was an ally of England. And so when he claimed, we called it New South Wales went as far as the line of demarcation. So the Treaty of Tordesillas survives in Australian political geography. So that's an inaccurate line, and in fact measuring this line, for various reasons, it was, until the 18th century, it was almost impossible to measure longitude, which is the vertical ones, with any accuracy, until they invented, William Harrison actually invented in Greenwich in England, the maritime chronometer. And the maritime chronometer made it possible. And if you go to London, go to Greenwich, the Maritime Museum, National Maritime Museum, and look at Harrison's maritime chronometers, which made possible the accurate mapping of the world. But that, I digress. I wanted to talk about the Spanish and Portuguese spheres of influence. And this line is also why the Philippines was Spanish, the Indonesian islands, Macau, trading posts in Japan, etc., were Portuguese, something that has survived over fairly recent times. So that's the Treaty of Tordesillas. So Spain got the Americas without Brazil. Portugal got Asia and Africa without the Philippines. And as you know, the Portuguese from the 1520s are trading in Timor, which is only a few hundred kilometres from northwest Australia. There is considerable evidence, and there's a wide historiography of it, and there's an article on it in your on the Views site. The possibility that there was a Portuguese voyage in 1522 to Australia, which sailed down the east coast of Australia. They wintered at Bateman's Bay, lost a ship at Warrnambool, dropped a key at Geelong, and then went back. We don't know if this happened or not. There's no documentary evidence of it. Cook would appear to have had a map of Australia that indicated it. I'll show you the prime evidence for it. This is the famous Dauphin map. The Dauphin, the Dauphin was the equivalent of the Prince of Wales in France, so the heir to the French throne. And this was a map drawn in Arc, so it's fait à Arc, done at Arc by Pierre de Cellier, published in the year 1550. That's what that means in French. So this is 1550. Very early, before any Dutch voyages to Indonesia, let alone to Australia. Right? Before any Dutch voyages to Indonesia. Right? So it's the only possible source is Portuguese. And this map shows the islands of Indonesia here. Here's Timor, here's Borneo, here's Sumatra, here's Java, and here's Big Java. And when we look at Big Java, it bears a remarkable resemblance to Australia, and this coast in particular, while it goes in a more easterly direction than the Queensland coast does, it is remarkably accurate as a map of the rivers and bays of North Queensland. All right, so if it ran down here like that, it would be a remarkably accurate map of North Queensland. It's got the Tropic of Capricorn there. And it has various creatures, such interesting people who lived in Australia at the time. So you can see here we've got this cross between a llama and a camel. And we've got another cross between a llama and a camel here. We've got this weird cross between a dog and an elephant. And we've got people here who seem to have their